made a mistake. Maybe it was years ago. Maybe it was last week. Maybe it was something you said, something you did, something you failed to do when it mattered most. And ever since, you've been trying to fix it. Not fix it exactly. Fix how people see you because of it. You've apologized. Maybe more than once. You've explained yourself. You've bent yourself into shapes you didn't recognize, trying to get back to some version of yourself that other people approved of. And here's the brutal question nobody is asking you. Did it work? Because here's what I've noticed, and the Stoics noticed it 2,000 years before me. The men who spend their lives seeking forgiveness from other people almost never find peace. Not because they don't deserve it. Not because the people they wronged are cruel. But because they are asking the wrong person for something that was never theirs to give. You cannot outsource your redemption to someone else's opinion of you. And Marcus Aurelius, a man who ruled an empire, made catastrophic mistakes in full public view and was judged by millions, understood something that most men never figure out. The opinion of others is not the measure of your character. Your response to your own failure is. This video is going to be uncomfortable because I'm not going to tell you that you're fine. I'm not going to tell you the people who judged you were wrong. I'm not going to validate your grievances or confirm your victimhood. I'm going to show you what Marcus Aurelius actually did and what it demands of you. Stay with me. Let's name what's actually happening when a man becomes trapped in the cycle of seeking forgiveness. Because this isn't just emotional discomfort. This is a full psychological architecture. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Psychologists call it approval-dependent self-esteem. It sounds clinical. But here's what it means in real life. Your sense of your own value is not generated internally. It's imported. It comes from outside. From how people look at you, what they say about you, whether they've decided you're acceptable again. And the problem with imported self-worth is this. The supply chain is completely outside your control. The person you wronged might never forgive you. The crowd that judged you might never change their verdict. The reputation that was damaged might take a decade to rebuild, or it might never fully recover. And if your inner stability depends on their verdict, you are permanently at the mercy of something you cannot govern. Here's where it gets darker. Neuroscience has a name for what happens to a man when he experiences public shame. It activates the same neural circuitry as physical pain. The anterior cingulate cortex, the region that processes social rejection, lights up identically to the region that processes being struck. In other words, your brain doesn't distinguish between being hit and being publicly shamed. No wonder it consumes you. No wonder you replay the moment. Replay the apology. Replay what you should have said differently, how you should have handled it, whether you came across as genuine or desperate. But here's what that neurological response was designed for. It was designed to motivate behavioral correction, not permanent subordination. The pain of shame exists to make you say, I made a mistake. I will not make it again. It was never designed to make you spend years of your life auditioning for other people's forgiveness. When you extend the shame cycle past its natural function, past the correction, past the genuine amends, something insidious happens. You begin to perform your guilt rather than process it. You become so focused on appearing remorseful that you stop actually being better. You're not working on your character anymore. You're managing your reputation. And the Stoics considered reputation management one of the most dangerous traps a man could fall into. because it is indistinguishable from cowardice, dressed up as humility. Let's go to Marcus Aurelius directly, because most people quote Marcus out of context, pulling the beautiful lines without understanding the life behind them. Marcus Aurelius was not a man who had the luxury of making mistakes in private. He was emperor of Rome. Every decision he made, military, political, personal, was watched, recorded, and judged by historians, senators, soldiers, and subjects. He outlived several of his children. He struggled with a wife whose fidelity some historians questioned. He elevated Commodus, his son, to co-emperor, a decision history has judged catastrophically. He had advisors who betrayed him, generals who failed him, and a body that was slowly destroying itself through illness while he continued to campaign. This man knew public failure intimately. And in the Meditations, again, the private journal he never intended for publication, he wrote something that should reframe everything you think you know about shame and forgiveness. Confine yourself to the present. If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. And perhaps most devastating of all, sit, it never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own. Read that last line again. We love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own. Marcus is not being poetic here. He is issuing a diagnosis. He is saying, you know yourself better than anyone. You have more evidence about your own character, your own intentions, your own efforts, than any external observer ever could. And yet, you are willing to let their partial, incomplete, often self-interested judgment override everything you actually know about yourself. That is not humility. That is abdication. Now consider what Marcus wrote about the nature of public opinion itself. He described fame and reputation as a river of momentary things. He noted that men who were celebrated in his time were forgotten within a generation. Men who were disgraced were eventually rehabilitated, or simply forgotten equally. The verdict of the crowd, he argued, is not a measurement of truth. It is a measurement of the crowd's current mood. This is the Stoic concept of ta ektos, external things. The category of reality that lies outside your control. Public opinion, other people's forgiveness. Your reputation in the eyes of people who weren't there, who don't know the full story, who have their own wounds and projections contaminating their judgment. Marcus placed ektos firmly in the category of indifference. The Stoic term, Adiaphora, not evil, not good, simply, not the domain where your character is determined. Your character is determined by reframes, the things that are up to you. Your response, your choices, your internal standard, your willingness to correct course and become better, regardless of whether anyone is watching or approving. And then there is Epictetus, who had something even more direct to say about seeking the forgiveness of others. He asked, in the Discourses, what does it cost you to be wrongly judged? Not actually wrongly judged, the feeling of being wrongly judged. He said the answer is nothing, unless you decide to pay. The harm of public shame is not in the shame itself. It is in your decision to grant the shamer's authority over your inner world. Epictetus called this giving assent, Synkatathesis. The moment when an external impression enters your mind and you agree to let it govern you. The alternative is not denial, not defensiveness, not pretending the judgment didn't happen. The alternative is what Epictetus called epoch suspension of assent. seeing the judgment, acknowledging it, and then choosing whether to grant it power. Most men never make that choice consciously. They simply absorb the verdict and spend years trying to appeal it. So what do you actually do with this? Because I know what some of you are thinking. This sounds like an excuse to skip accountability, to just decide other people's opinions don't matter and call it Stoicism. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm building for you right now is a framework called the Three Reckonings, drawn directly from Marcus Aurelius's actual practice in the Meditations. A structured process for moving through shame, making genuine amends, and reclaiming your inner authority without becoming either a doormat or a narcissist. Reckoning 1. The Honest Inventory. What is actually true? Before you can stop seeking forgiveness compulsively, you have to do something most men skip entirely. You have to render your own verdict, not the crowd's verdict, not the verdict of the person you harmed. Your verdict, honest, unsparing, private. Marcus Aurelius did this constantly in the Meditations. He caught himself in vanity, in anger, in poor judgment, and he named it clearly, without excusing it and without catastrophizing it. Here's the practice. Take the situation, the mistake, the failure, the moment you've been seeking forgiveness for. Write down 3 things. First, what did I actually do? Not the narrative, not the justification, the action. Strip it to behavior. What happened, stated plainly, as if you were describing someone else. Second, what was the genuine harm? Not the social consequence to you, the actual impact on whoever was affected. This is the hardest line to write honestly, because most men unconsciously conflate how bad this made me look with how much damage I actually caused. These are not the same thing. Third, was this a character failure or a circumstantial failure? Marcus Aurelius made this distinction repeatedly. A character failure is a pattern, a repeating expression of values that need to change. A circumstantial failure is a single decision, made under specific pressures, that doesn't define the whole architecture of who you are. This distinction matters enormously, because the response is different. A character failure demands transformation, a sustained, effortful rebuilding of the pattern. A circumstantial failure demands acknowledgement, genuine amends, and then release. Most men treat every mistake as a character indictment, which is why they can never stop apologizing. Because no amount of apology repairs what they believe is fundamentally broken about themselves. The honest inventory separates what is genuinely broken from what is simply human. Reckoning 2. The genuine amends. What do I owe, and to whom? Here is where Stoicism diverges sharply from both modern therapy culture and from toxic masculinity. The Stoics were not dismissive of obligation. Marcus Aurelius wrote extensively about duty, kathekon, the appropriate action given your role, your relationships, and your situation. If you caused harm, you owe amends. Not to manage your reputation, not to feel better, not to extract forgiveness from someone so you can move on. You owe amends because it is right, because the other person's experience of being harmed is real, because your integrity demands that you acknowledge reality even when it costs you. Here is the Stoic distinction that changes everything. Amends is an action. Forgiveness is a response. You are only responsible for the action. You make amends honestly, once, clearly without qualification or self-defense. You acknowledge what you did. You acknowledge the impact. You communicate what you are doing differently. And then, you release the outcome. Whether they forgive you is to ektos, external, beyond your governance, not the measure of your character. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Do what nature requires. Set out immediately if possible. Don't look around to see if people will know about it. Don't expect Plato's ideal state, but be satisfied with even the smallest step forward." Even the smallest step forward. Not the approval, not the standing ovation, not the public absolution. The step, the genuine amends, offered once clearly without agenda, is the step. After that, the work moves inward. Reckoning 3. The internal tribunal. Whose court matters? This is the deepest reckoning, and the one most men never reach. Marcus Aurelius had a concept he returned to repeatedly in the Meditations. The idea of living as if watched by the greatest minds. Not the crowd, not politicians, not critics, but the philosophers, the men who understood what a human being was actually capable of. He wrote of asking himself, "Would I be ashamed if Epictetus could see this?" Not, "Would the senators approve?" Not, "Will history judge me well?" But, "Would the man I most respect, the man who represents what I am trying to become, find this consistent with that aspiration?" This is what I call the internal tribunal. You build it deliberately. You populate it with 2 or 3 figures, real or historical, who represent the standard you are reaching toward. For most of you watching this channel, those figures are probably Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca. Perhaps someone from your own life, a father, a mentor, a man you watched handle adversity with grace. And when you face the urge to seek external forgiveness, when you feel the pull to apologize again, to explain yourself again, to audition for someone's approval again, you bring your case to the internal tribunal instead. You ask, does this man, this internal figure, require more apology from me? Or does he require that I simply become better? 9 times out of 10, the answer is the second one. Because the internal tribunal is not interested in your performance of guilt. It is interested in your trajectory. Where are you going? What are you building? What kind of man is emerging from this failure? That is the question that matters. Not whether the crowd has forgiven you. Not whether the person you wronged has let you off the hook. Not whether your reputation has recovered. The question is, are you becoming the man that failure was meant to make you? If yes, you are already forgiven, in the only court that has actual jurisdiction over your character. If no, no amount of external forgiveness will touch the real problem. I want to close with something Marcus Aurelius wrote that I think about more than almost anything else in Western philosophy. He wrote it during one of the hardest periods of his life, the Marcomannic Wars, years of brutal campaigning, loss after loss, the empire under pressure from every direction. He wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This is the principle the Stoics called Amor Fati, love of fate, not passive acceptance, not spiritual bypass, but the active, muscular decision to use whatever happens, including your own failures, your own shame, your own public humiliation, as material. The man who seeks forgiveness is waiting for the shame to be removed. The Stoic practitioner asks, how do I use this? Because shame, metabolized correctly, is one of the most powerful forces for transformation available to a human being. It tells you exactly where your values and your behavior diverged. It shows you the gap between who you intended to be and who you actually showed up as in that moment. That gap is not evidence of your worthlessness. That gap is your curriculum. Marcus Aurelius riding in a military tent on the Germanic frontier, surrounded by evidence of Rome's fragility and his own failures as a leader, did not write letters begging history to forgive him. He wrote the Meditations. He wrote the standard, the thing he was trying to build toward, the argument for what a human being could be if they were willing to do the interior work. And 1,800 years later, that document is still changing lives. Not because Marcus succeeded perfectly, because he faced himself honestly and then kept going. That is what the art of shame demands of you. Not endless apology, not reputation management, not the exhausting performance of contrition for an audience that may never be satisfied. Just this: face what is true, make the amends that are owed, build the internal tribunal, and then, with the same quiet ferocity Marcus carried into every campaign, become the answer to your own failure. Because that is the only forgiveness that actually sets you free. Here's your comment prompt for this video. And I mean it when I say I read every single one. Finish this sentence. The mistake I've spent the most time seeking forgiveness for is, and what the Stoics are making me realize is, you don't have to name the mistake specifically. You don't have to go public with something private. But naming the pattern, even in general terms, is the first act of prosoj, the first act of Stoic self-inspection. And reading what you write might become the foundation of the next video on this channel. If this video reached something real in you, something you've been carrying, share it with one man who needs to hear it. Not for the algorithm, for him. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is the channel that goes here every single week. No hype, no empty motivation. Just philosophy that was forged under genuine pressure and still holds. I'll see you in the next one.